A federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan about 40 years ago just came out with a scathing order against the Trump regime. And the judge said, I just got to be real. You're racist. This is a racist policy that you are implementing against DEI and trans and gender and your executive orders as it relates to the NIH. I've never had to use language like this in my 40 years as a federal judge, this Republican, Reagan, very conservative judge. This is the most blatantly racist, obviously discriminatory thing I have ever witnessed. And there's not even a close second. And then he reamed the Trump regime even more from there. Here's how Kyle Cheney reports it. A federal judge in Massachusetts, Reagan-appointed Judge William Young, declared the Trump regime's cuts to NIH grants over Trump's executive orders on gender ideology and DEI are illegal and void. He's ordering the grants be restored. Here's what federal Judge Young said. I'm hesitant to draw this conclusion, but I have an unflinching obligation to draw it, that this represents racial discrimination and discrimination against America's LGBTQ community. That's what this is. I would be blind not to call it out. My duty is to call it out. It's palpably clear that these directives and the set of terminated grants here also are designed to frustrate, to stop research that may bear on the health. We're talking about health here, the health of Americans, of our LGBTQ community. That is appalling. This is appalling. I've never seen a record where racial discrimination was so palpable. I've sat on this bench now for 40 years. I've never seen the government racial discrimination like this. I ask myself, how can this even be? I have the protection that the founders wrote into the Constitution, along with imposing upon me a duty to speak the truth in every case. I try to do that. What if I didn't have those protections? What if my job was on the line, my profession? Would I have stood up against it all? I have a duty to stand up to it now, and that's what I am doing today. Very conservative, very right-wing judge, Reagan appointed. And you see, Harry, the difference between a Reagan Republican appointed judge and whatever this whole MAGA thing is. You know, when I teach at USC Law, I often ask the students questions. I never get political. I just ask them the question. I go, right now, do you think in 2025, the Civil Rights Act could be passed today? Raise your hand. No one raises their hand. Raise your hand if you think the Voting Rights Act could be passed today in 2025. Nobody raises their hand. Raise your hand if any of the gender equality laws, do you think any of this could pass today? Nobody raises their hand. And I go, isn't that both a remarkable and sad observation that here we are in 2025 and there's not a single person who believes that bipartisan legislation, don't get me wrong, there was some controversy around it, but by and large, bipartisan civil rights equality legislation from the mid-60s to the early 70s could not have a chance to be passed in 2025. And that says it all. And this judge, a Reagan-appointed judge who would enforce those types of civil rights judges, that wasn't like a Democrat-Republican thing. We were all kind of for that until this, you know, it was a long-term project, but this corrosive destruction of decency. Harry, break it down for us.
Scorching. All right, let's start here just with what he's saying. Look, Ben, this is, yes, I mean, he's saying we're not in 1965 anymore. He's sort of saying we are in 1945. I mean, he's basically saying the government, the executive branch, is practicing discrimination on the basis of race and gender identity and sexual orientation. This Reagan judge, as you say, been on the bench 40 years. He cannot fathom, and he's saying this is the country we are living in, an absolutely unjust, racist, officially racist society, not just culturally racist from the government. Okay, that's for starters. The second thing to note is the overall trajectory of what's happening in the federal courts. Notice he first says, I'm reluctant to do this. I've never said it before. That's because there's a very strong norm, you could say. In some ways, it's even memorialized into law that you can't call out and disparage the executive branch this way. You have to say, be polite and say for whatever reason and not go and actually call them out as racist. That norm is eroding more every week as judges see not only the cases in front of them, but the cases in front of their colleagues, where the administration is doing stuff that is absolutely outrageous. And you're seeing, I've tried to make the point before, we think a lot about Trump judges versus other judges. I think a really important distinction is district court judges versus judges on courts of appeals on the Supreme Court, because the district court judges are seeing the evidence, seeing what actually comes before them, forcing the administration to take positions. And they are now emboldened and saying, you guys, you're not just not satisfying the legal requirements of the Constitution. You guys are indecent. You guys are inhumane. You guys are racist. You guys are a shameful holders of government power. And so I think not only the real sort of extremeness of what he's saying, but the way it links to other cases. We saw this, for example, in the law firm cases. We saw it in the Alien Enemies Act cases, where courts after court said this is unconstitutional. But as it went on, each court was more emboldened. Boasberg to Zinnis to Murphy, each one was more emboldened to say, you guys are on drugs if you think this is possibly part of the Constitution. The bottom line, I'm enjoining it. It's unconstitutional. But the sort of atmospherics in the legal and governmental community of saying, you really are just beyond the pale of what government or actors are supposed to be, that's getting stronger and stronger. We'll see how the administration responds to it. But I've never heard, and this guy makes it clear he's never said that kind of scathing criticism, calling out as racist and discriminatory from the bench. And I'm talking about, liberal to conservative judges. The general kind of second order norms of separation of powers, of, benefits of the doubt, cushions, not going right to the heart of things, are wearing out, and quickly, as courts are being confronted with incredibly extreme, nasty, executive orders and the like, and public pronouncements in support of them that are completely beyond the pale and un-American, I think would not be too strong a word. So that statement here, it's just what he said in hearing. His opinion hasn't issued. It will soon. It will strike things down. But it's an event in itself that a federal court judge, a Reagan appointee, as you say, is coming out and really blatantly characterizing the administration for the sort of nasty, indecent, unconstitutional, un-American ethos that drives all these orders.
I think about the No Kings protests, low estimate 6 million, high end 12 million, anywhere close to 2 to 3% of the population, mass mobilization against the Trump regime's executive orders and dictatorial policies. And it was an important showing. And when I think about all those peaceful protests, I think about the diversity. I think about white people, black people, Asian people, Indian people, whoever. Everybody was out. That doesn't make a difference. We're shoulder to shoulder. We're human beings, gay people, straight people, trans people. I think about the lectures that I teach at USC, and I think about how we conduct ourselves in a classroom. It would be unfathomable for me if a student stood up and someone with one skin color said to some other kid with another skin color, you know, you're this, you're DEI, get the hell out of here, get the hell out of here. You're gay, you shouldn't be in my class, or you're trans. When I wrap up my semester, you know, I try to kind of, again, not get political, but I want to give a message, especially a lot to some of the guys who are in the class, you know, because I think a lot of men have been captured by this idea that bullying marginalized communities is alpha and cool, which it's not. So I somehow try to speak to that group as well. And I talk about my experience in high school and college, you know, that to me, the quote unquote cool kids were always the people who stood up against the bullies, not the bullies. But I also talked about the learning environment. And I said, how great was this class? We had 105 students. Look around you. No one looks the same. We never had conversations about what gender somebody is or what sexual orientation they are. We all did group projects. We worked together. We were respectful of each other's space and dignity, and we had a good semester. So why do you go into the real world and then all of a sudden just start behaving in these vile ways to our fellow human beings? I said, don't view that as a political issue. View that as a human being thing. You shouldn't go through your life hating on other human beings. We're better than that. And so in conclusion, it was really good to see a Reagan appointed judge who's been on the bench for 40 years in 2025 leave this indelible record on this moment. I wish there could be more than that. That's not going to get us through or out of this moment. But when we look back and reflect on what are such dark times that words don't even do it justice to even describe what is happening to our country as we're recording this, I think this is one of these opinions that we can point to our audience and say, there's hope. They're not all like this. And so I'll leave it at that.
And just briefly, yeah, I think that's right. I think there will be more, Ben. And just go into the orders themselves, the two orders under review. They take, look, I understand principled arguments about DEI on either side. The Biden argument, which prevailed for some time, also, it never went to the line of unlawfulness. That's 100% clear. That's a lie on the part of the Trump administration. But the idea was just as you say with your class of 105, you look around and you see what sort of looks like America. That was the argument in favor. That's been totally demolished by Trump. But the actual orders here, so the one general one basically comes out of the box and says, Biden, unlawful, terrible. It's so like insulting and never really takes on anything about the good or bad. There's no argument there. It's just DEI bad. And then the other one, that's the trans one. That is just, you know, it treats a subclass of Americans as if they're, you know, lepers or worse who can be discriminated against. There's no thought of it's as if it's completely vanished from the public discourse. Not the idea of unlawful discrimination. That's always been beyond the pale, but what should be done so that important programs, et cetera, kind of look like America. I see it both. I'm not trying to make that argument here. What I'm trying to say is Young was reacting, among other things, to language in orders that go so far beyond what supposedly they want to do legally, which is just say pare back on DEI stuff to the legal limit, and are just insulting, high-handed, yes, racist, or at least very dismissive and ugly about other sorts of people. These are the official documents, the supposed laws of the land. And by the way, right, given how things have done, it's all he's done is executive orders, almost all of which have been shut down. He has nothing to show for those and nothing to show on the legislative front. But these are the official documents of the United States of America that are just read like a vicious seventh grader. That's part of what's going on too. The very coarse level of discourse that our government in our name is putting into operation. That's totally understandable that a Reagan judge who's been there 40 years would have a reflexive opposition of just like, man, oh man, this is not how we do things in this country. So.
Not how we do things in this country. It's why we're doing what we're doing, Harry, here too, to try to make this information accessible to people, regardless of political party. This is what happened. This is what was said. This is a Reagan judge saying it. So however you want to take that. But those are the facts. Subscribe to Harry Litman's Substack, YouTube, and podcast. They're all under the Talking Feds umbrella. So you just search Talking Feds. Search Talking Feds on YouTube. You'll get Harry's daily videos. Search Talking Feds on audio podcast. You'll get it. Search Substack, Talking Feds. You'll get it. Harry, thanks as always.
Thank you, Ben. A pleasure.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.MeidasTouch.com.